All right, Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is lifespan development. We're going to be taking a look at the various stages and ages of patients we're going to potentially be dealing with. A lot of what we cover in this chapter is not particularly difficult concepts. A lot of it is common sense, and it's just things that if we stop for a moment and consider, okay, who am I dealing with and what do I know already about this age group, it probably will make a lot of sense. There are just 4 objectives in this chapter, but we're looking at the same 4 objectives essentially for all of the age groups that we're dealing with. A couple multimedia slides that you can take a look at. But our core concepts that we're really shooting for: to define the physiological or the physical characteristics of the different age groups from infancy through late adulthood, to consider the psychosocial or the mental and social characteristics of the different age groups from infancy through adulthood. So we'll start with infancy. Infancy is birth to 1 year of age, and in infancy, technically, if we want to break it down a little bit further, we could consider that infancy is actually from 1 month to 1 year of age, and you're considered a neonate from time of birth until 1 month of age. But for our purposes, we'll just consider infancy as being up to 1 year of age. So as we look at the physiological characteristics of an infant, they're roughly 3 to 3.5 kilograms, which is 6.6 to 7.7 pounds. They're 2.2 pounds per kilogram. So if you don't know how to do this, if you take their weight in pounds, which is what we're used to in America, we'll say, for example, we'll steer away from infant for a moment, we'll say a 220-pound adult, and we divide that by 2.2, it gives us 100 kilograms. We could do basically a very similar process with a 22-pound child, divided by 2.2, and that would give us a 10 kilogram child. So if you really want to have a quick way to do this, take their weight in pounds, cut it in half. So we'll take that 22-pounder again. 22 cut it in half is 11, and then you drop, or you take the first digit, or the first 2 digits if it's a 3-digit number. So in the case of 10, then we take the 1, we subtract that away from the 11, and it gives us 10. So their weight's going to double by about 6 months, and it's going to triple by about 12 months. So if they're born at, say, we'll just say an even 3 kilograms, we'll say that they are going to be about 6 kilograms by 6 months, and then should be about 9 kilograms by the time they reach 12 months. So roughly 18 to 20 pounds by the time they reach 1 year of age. Their head is about 25% of their body weight. So when we look at that, we can see that babies do have large heads. There's a lot of development still going on. In fact, the neurologic system is the last system to fully develop, and it takes till about age 21 or so for it to fully develop. There's still so much development that needs to occur. That's why babies are unable to sit up or walk or do anything immediately from birth. Their airway is narrow. It's easily obstructed. Their head tips forward if we lay them down flat, so it kind of pushes on their airway. It's an itty-bitty tiny thing about the size of a typical little soda straw or a small little pencil. That's about the size of their airway. And then their nose and diaphragm are basically their primary structures for respiration. Babies are obligate nose breathers, so if we stimulate their nose, they're going to breathe. All right, so they're primarily nose breathers until at least 4 weeks of age, and then they start to rely a little bit more on their mouth. And then if we have problems with the diaphragm, we can have more difficulty breathing. The diaphragm is really the only well-developed structure that they have for that. In the older children and the adults, we've got intercostal muscles between the ribs. We've got nice firm ribs, in which babies have very pliable ribs. And we have some other accessory muscles that help along with this. Babies will typically get a lot of their immunity from their mother, and the antibodies passed generally from mother to child during pregnancy, and there are some additional antibodies that can be passed if the mother chooses to breastfeed. There's a couple of reflexes that we look at. The Morrow reflex, which is the startle reflex. If they get startled, say with loud noise or say a heavy vibration or thud, they'll throw their arms out and spread their finger and grab with their fingers and arms, trying to catch something to stabilize themselves. They have the palmar reflex. When you place something in their palm, they'll grasp it to hold on to. It's a way that they can additionally make themselves feel safe. They'll have the rooting reflex. So if you brush something against an infant's cheek, they'll turn their head generally towards the side that was touched, thinking that's the nipple. And then, of course, the sucking reflex. If you stroke their lip, they'll start to suck as they feel that they've found the food source. Their sleeping patterns, they begin to regulate a little bit after about 2 to 4 months, and then generally will start, the closer they get to 1 year of age, hopefully will start to sleep a little more through the night. Infants will sleep 16 to 18 hours a day, and hopefully they will start to develop more normal human hours, but the babies need that sleep for development. The extremities grow from a combination of growth plates and epiphyseal plates. These are on the ends of the bones, and then near both, mostly in the long bones, but these are going to start to, they're not fully fused, so they allow the bone to grow in length much easier. Once those fuse in late adolescence, usually, the lengthening growth tends to stop. The bones in the top of the skull are not fully fused, or they're not actually fused at all. Those form the soft spot, referred to as the fontanelles. There are actually 4 of those. There's one that most of us are probably familiar with. Basically, if you would go directly above their ears and a little bit towards the front, on the top of the head, you would find the anterior fontanelle. That tends to be the largest one. There is a posterior fontanelle, which is kind of on the crown of the back of the head, and there are a couple of fontanelles, one on each side. These fontanelles are there to allow those bony plates to shift during childbirth. After the child has been born and is receiving more nutrients, then those joints, essentially, are what those are, start to fuse and become solid. And if you would look at a skull of someone who's grown or nearly fully grown, you would see that it has kind of a lot of fingerling-looking things in between those 2 bony plates that fuse together. Fontanelles are not fused but still soft until upwards to 18 months or so. We do pay attention to the fontanelles just a little bit in our infant population. Sunken-in fontanelles indicate that the child is potentially dehydrated or in shock, and a bulging fontanelle indicates that there's an increased pressure inside the skull. Now, the bulging fontanelle doesn't work when the child is crying. When the kid is crying, there is an increase in intracranial pressure or pressure within the skull. However, it's not a constant thing. So if we see the child that's kind of resting or relaxing, we notice that their fontanelle is bulging outward, we should be suspect of increased intracranial pressure. Some psychosocial characteristics that we'll see in them. Jamie's, or the baby's primary way of communicating is crying, and that's really what they have to let anyone around them know, hey, I need something. Within the first 6 months, they start to bond with their caregivers, or the ones that they know that they can trust, and they can sense that their needs will be met. This is through senses of smell and probably somewhat of sound. They'll develop some trust versus mistrust. They have a desire for orderly, predictable environment, and if things are not the norm, then they tend to be a little less happy about the situation. Scaffolding, they learn by building on what they already know. So they'll take and they'll, as something new is introduced into their daily routine, they kind of start to build that in. And then they have some temperamental reaction to the environment. And sometimes it's not such a great temperament. Any parents out there that have had children that have had the colic know that, yeah, you don't want an upset baby. There's the video on the infant. So we move on to toddler. The toddler phase is from 1 year to 3 years, or age 12 to 36 months. So the body temperature changes a little bit here. A newborn baby obviously has a difficult time maintaining its own body temperature. That's why we keep them wrapped up all the time. They, probably have their heads covered, and even in the middle of the summer, a lot of times they're covered up. The body temperature now starts to even out. Ranges from 98.6 to 99.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The child will then gain somewhere around 4.4 to 4.5 pounds per year as they continue to grow, and then all their body systems continue to develop and improve in efficiency. This is an age in which you see a lot of fantastic development in the child. You really see the child starting to develop personality and a lot of its traits it'll eventually get. The pulmonary system, the terminal airways branch out and grow. There's now a lot more alveoli, so respiratory rates can come down. They don't have to breathe quite as fast because they have more alveoli in there to take care of that need. The nervous system, the brain is now about 90% of what it will be at the adult weight, and the fine motor skills start to develop. Those fine motor skills still won't be fully developed until they're well into their teens, but they're starting. Musculoskeletal system, muscle mass and bone densities are going to start to increase, and we're going to see kids walking because of this. Immune system, they're more susceptible to illnesses. They've lost some of that immunity that they gained from mom. They're probably, in many cases, not breastfeeding anymore. And so the immunity has actually started to drop. However, in the modern developed society, we typically will then substitute immunizations for some of that immunity to help them build up their own immunities. They're starting to develop teeth by 36 months. The young child will have all of their primary teeth, or what is referred to as the baby teeth. Although physiologically capable of being toilet trained by the ages of 12 to 15 months, most aren't ready psychologically until they're 18 to 30 months of age. That seems to be the big trial that a lot of parents have to face, is getting this potty training going on. And honestly, it's all up to the kid. When the kid decides it's time, then that's when it's going to happen. So, physiologic characteristics that we'll also see: the pulmonary system, nervous system, musculoskeletal system, immune system, teeth. Talked about those on the previous slide. Psychosocial characteristics, they begin to understand cause and effect. So they know if I touch this, it's going to hurt. If I touch this, it's going to be soft, or it's going to be hot. So they're very highly curious, and they investigate a lot of things. People who have had toddlers know that you can't keep them out of anything. This is why we have to childproof our houses, because they want to see it all and check it all. They do have separation anxiety. They are very tightly connected to their caregivers or their parents, and they don't want to let them go. They don't want to get away from them because they understand that that's their safe zone. They will be very clingy. They'll cry when their parents leave a lot, but eventually they do adapt. They'll start to develop some of that magical thinking, imagination, a lot of role play, a lot of highly imaginative things that they do. they're going to master some of those basic language ideas, and they're going to continue to be refined as that child grows. Moving on to the preschool age, preschoolers will continue to develop and refine their various purposes. They really now start to have some good personality, and it's really fun to watch a lot of these kids as they start to learn and develop ideas on their own. So if we were talking about some of the physiologic aspects of this child, we can look at table 7-5, and actually there's a little table like this for all of the different age groups, so you can kind of see what their typical heart rates, respiratory volumes, and their systolic blood pressures are going to look like. So we can see that in the preschooler we have a heart rate of 80 to 120, respirators of 20 to 30, and their systolic, or their upper blood pressure, is somewhere in the 80 to 110 range. So it's coming nicely, and as we age, just in general, respiratory rates will come down until you get older and develop some sort of a respiratory problem. Heart rates will also come down, and obviously that can be the same circumstance for an older adult that has developed some sort of a medical condition. And then blood pressures will tend to rise. So heart rates and respirators come down, blood pressures go up. The psychosocial aspects, they're developing their interactive social skills. This can also be a very trying age in which there's a lot of trying to learn to interact with other people. There's a lot of mine that goes on here, and people are like, no, you know, they can't share their toys, or they, you know, there's a lot of hitting, and so there's a few things that are also trying in this age. When we move to school-age children, we're talking 6 to 12 years of age, and the school-age child are starting, the body temperature is now basically leveled off at that norm, and when I say norm, remember this isn't everybody, but it's an average, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. School-age children will gain about 6.5 to 6.6 pounds per year and grow around 2.5 inches per year. And this is the age in which the primary, or the baby teeth, start to come out and the permanent teeth start to come in. The typical vital signs are listed on page 163 in your textbook there. They're getting very, very close to that of an adult. Psychosocially speaking, they need less general supervision. They still shouldn't be left alone, but generally they can be trusted a little bit more. When we talk about quiet babies, we generally consider that to be a bad thing, but quiet school-age children is another. They're developing some decision-making skills. They can make more decisions on their own, sometimes need to be allowed to make bad decisions so they can learn to make better decisions. Self-esteem is coming up. They're starting to recognize that they have peer groups and friends. They know what rejection feels like, or emotional support. They will often feel neglected if they're not getting the attention they feel they need. They're developing some morals. They're looking to see what sort of rewards they can get from their parents for being right, or what punishment they might get for being wrong. And then moral reasoning appears to control their behavior, and they will then start to shift to external sources, from external to internal sources, so they'll start to appreciate their own sense of well-being. When we get to the adolescent, this is ages 13 to 18. Various sources will differ on this. Some experts will say that this should be 19 or 20 or 21. Even occasionally hear somebody call for it to be 25 when they actually are quote-unquote fully grown. So the three major development ages included infancy, adolescence, and then late adulthood are the three kind of major stepping stones here. Physiologically speaking, they generally have a significant growth spurt, a 2 to 3 year growth spurt, beginning with enlargement of their hands and feet, followed by the legs and arms, and they typically will grow several inches a year. And then sexual maturity obviously starts to occur. You start to see secondary sexual development, such as breast development, hair, and menstruation in females. Psychosocially, they're going to strive for their independence, interested in the opposite sex. They're greatly concerned with their body image and peers, what their peers think. Eating disorders may be common in this time span. Depression and suicide are also common in this age group. They're not capable, in most cases, of reasoning out that this is, this is just a drop in the bucket. They think that this is their whole world, and then they develop this capacity for logical and analytical, as well as some abstract thinking, and they develop their own personal code of ethics. So, how am I going to live my life? How am I going to do it when I get out on my own? So adolescents are often injured because of their risk-taking behaviors. They think they're invincible. A lot of times they also think that they are impregnable. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. They may be resistant to disclose what happened because they know, well, mom and dad have told me, they've told me, they've told me, and now, crap, I did it, I'm going to be in trouble. And then a lot of times they're going to need to be encouraged to explain the circumstances of what's happened. When you're dealing with those adolescents, you sometimes really do need to remove them from the oversight of their parents or guardians, just simply to get the straight answers. And you may need to tell them, look, I don't really care what you're doing if you're being sexually active or you're taking drugs or whatever, but it's important that we know this so we can take care of you appropriately. So, and sometimes that'll work for you. So early adulthood, at 19 to 40 years of age, this is really kind of your prime. You've developed your lifelong habits and routines. Your peak physical condition is really between ages 19 and 26. Psychosocially, you're finishing your education and you're getting a job. You may start to add a family to this, marriage and childbirth and child rearing. Family stress is involved. Accidents tend to be the leading cause of death. I've heard people describe the leading cause of death for those under the age of 40 is being stupid today, and the leading causes of death for those over the age of 40 is stupidity yesterday that's now caught up with you. So it's kind of an interesting analogy, and it really is pretty true. As we move on to middle adulthood, there's really not a lot of significant changes in vital signs from early adulthood. We're talking ages 41 through 60 here. They're starting to have maybe some vision problems, might have to start considering wearing some glasses or contacts if they haven't had to up to this age. Cancer becomes a big concern. Heart disease will often develop. We used to think heart disease was really something for the 40s and 50-year-olds of the world, and it's really becoming more, even younger than that now, into the early adulthood. But by the time you're starting to get into your 40s and 50s, there's a lot of probability here. So weight becomes more difficult to control simply for the fact that metabolism doesn't function quite as well as it used to. Menopause may begin for women in their late 40s or 50s. And then heart disease is the major killer after the age of 40. So again, that whole what you did yesterday coming back to haunt you. So and those of us that are in our 40s these days, really we're on the front end of mass fast food, and it catches up with us. Psychosocially, they're much more task-oriented at this point. They're trying to, they're very much geared by getting X, Y, and Z done. They tend to approach their problems more as challenges than as threats. They may start to experience some empty nest syndromes or some midlife crises where they're kind of like, oh crap, my life's half over. I need to do something with my life. My kids are all leaving me and now I'm lonely. It can be a time of increased freedom and opportunity for self-fulfillment, and then towards the end of it, they're probably also now starting to care for their elderly parents. So when we're talking about the middle adulthood, you get out of taking care of one set of family members and into taking care of another. So, later adulthood, ages 61 and older. Vital signs will depend on physical condition and health. They may or not be in the best physical condition or health. Depends a lot on how they've lived their life up to this point. Cardiovascular system is much less efficient. Volume of blood decreases. Respiratory system deteriorates. It's starting to be worn out and doesn't function quite as nicely as it used to. Leads to a higher risk of potential respiratory disorders. Changes in the endocrine system can result in decreased metabolism. Sleep-wake cycles are disrupted, and other body systems are deteriorating as time progresses. Kind of a mood killer here. Psychosocial, the living environment. This may need to be changing. How long is that person going to be able to live at home? And there's not a fine line in the sand for that. Sometimes people function at home very well into their 80s and 90s. I have even seen somebody over the age of 100 that lived alone at home. But some people will develop medical problems that will lead them to some sort of a supported living situation, whether that be a nursing home or living with family members or assisted livings or what have you, much earlier in life. They'll start to worry about their self-worth. They're worried that the quality of work that they produce isn't as good, and is it benefiting people as well as it should. They have a lot of financial burdens. With limited income, if you're on retirement, expenses may increase, particularly if there's health issues. And then, of course, cost of living really never goes down, even though you stop getting a full salary. And then death and dying. They're very well aware of their friends are dying, their family members are dying, and they're worried about their own health and how this could potentially put things to an end real quickly. So their motivation is going to be their personal interests. Their level of activities can enhance this later time in life. So just because they've retired doesn't mean they have to be sedentary. A lot of times this is a time in which people will see a little resurgence in some of their youthful activity and feeling, simply because they now have more time to do such things. So real briefly in review, we understand basic physiologic and psychosocial development at each age, and it can assist you in communicating with and assessing your patients. There's obviously some physiologic differences that will affect your care. Respiratory systems, pre-existing conditions. Infants and children aren't probably in the best shape all the time for everything, depending on where they're at in their social and their physiologic development. And then communication techniques are going to have to vary a little bit, whether we're dealing with separation anxieties or depression, or people not wanting to be very forthcoming. So you're called for an abdominal pain in a 16-year-old girl. She is with friends at the park. She seems hesitant to answer any of your questions and what characteristics of adolescent development is most likely the cause of this. And how can you overcome this? You got to remember, there may be parts to her life that her friends may think is not cool, but she is doing anyway and trying to hide it, so it's going to be one of those things that she doesn't necessarily want to discuss. And this might be a situation in which you need to remove the friends or move this patient to the ambulance before you continue your questioning.